Aloha, everyone. We are here at the neutral zone. It is Monday. Wait a minute. No, it's Thursday, November 14th. But Monday,
Friday.
we have a show. And so this is a recorded show, yes. Robin Knox is my guest. As you can see, Robin Knox, you may know. Some of you know her as C. Lily. She has I want to say, a spiritual and a whole different side of a beautiful, great mom. She's a mom, and you know her probably as Robin Knox, the politician. But I know her as someone, when I first heard of her and met her, she was doing dancing and prayer with Prema and My Lady Ariel and other beautiful ladies, honoring and doing a whole special thing. And I've been around watching, when Taisitu Rinpoche came here and I'm videoing. I get great experiences through my partner. And through those experiences, we see each other in different light. I saw you performing, and it's more than performing because it's a prayer. But they were doing it there at Kihei at the Veterans Center and such, way before I thought about politics. But to know that someone has had a life and background before Maui that's been so rich, then came here and put yourself on the chopping block, being a candidate takes a lot of guts because people look at you in ways that aren't even related or fair. I ran so long ago. I'm still labeled as that green guy by some, and others call me right. What the heck? I think of you that way. We're old veterans of this game watching this island drying up. I drive, how did I think about you for the show? I drive from Kahului, where I live, to Kihei to see Ariel. And where those green mountains are all brown, 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 every direction except Kiave. They have figured out how to do it, and they are just thriving. But truthfully, like, you see all the things going on, and there are all kinds of issues on Maui. But because you're a water expert, I'd like to let you go and kind of guide where we're going to talk about. I have a few questions along the way, but it's all brown. We have water, and it's going to grow things, and it's going to, you'll help me understand. And we see that you don't know how to get water in a channel and save it. What's going on? And it runs down the hill and it destroys things. What's going on here? Why do we have these problems? And what are we going to do about it? We've seen land swaps. I'll give you one. Tom Cook. You remember him? You ran against him, didn't you? Yesterday, was it yesterday? Day before yesterday, Paul. Maybe it was Paul Delorier and the group Maui Pono Network and lots of groups talking about one of our council people, Tom Cook, and he gets 90 something thousand as a council person and 270,000, something like that. Isn't it like triple, 9 times 3? And they're not considering it something important enough to take further and investigate further. I didn't hear any more details than that. I thought, who are these people? Who's making these decisions? So as you go, realize I'm a big loudmouth, and I talk way outside, and I don't want anyone listening to think that you are advising, me, or that this is anyway political, because you are who you are, and I just have a lot of steam over what I keep seeing, getting worse and
Yeah.
worse. And I saw about the land swap when I got involved in real estate, where the water coming down the hill in Kihei has to learn to make a right and a left because someone did a land swap and the thing doesn't go all the way to the water. That was by design, by a land swap, and now they have condos there. What do you do now? So, I
Well,
have all.
we tend to, I think when it comes to water, there's a lot of magical thinking and there's a lot of nonsensical thinking. and and what's missing in my book is systematic thinking and thinking about the water. If you give a moment of contemplation, um, start with the concept of oneness and the recognition that there is really only one water system, one water cycle on this whole planet. And it is affected by everyone on the planet, and it affects everyone on the planet. And so, us here in the United States, burning all of our fossil fuels can trigger things like melting ice caps and sea level rise that can flood people in low-lying nations and island states somewhere else in the world. It can cause weather patterns to shift, cause people to lose the rainfall that they need for growing food, or to have too much rainfall and not be able to grow food. So the whole balance of water systems and everything that they support, like ecological systems and all life on the planet, it's all about balance. It's all about a whole planet literally full of systems within systems within systems that are all interconnected. And so anytime we go about making changes as humans, we need to not be arrogant. We need to have a little bit of hubris, and we need to realize that we don't know everything. In fact, we know very little. So we need to exercise caution when we're going to change the water system, whether we're talking natural or man-made. It needs thought. What is it connected to? What does it impact? What will be impacted by these changes? So some of the ones you described, when you build condominiums in the flow path of a gulch, the water that's on its way to the ocean, if it's a small amount of water, it may stay in that new channel that you dug to take it around the condos. But if it's a lot of water, it just will go over the banks and through the parking lots and into people's condos. Water seeks the lowest levels. So a lot of times we need to think like water, if we're going to.
Why didn't we save it or still divert it, store it? Hannibal Tavares and Ariel and I spoke in like 1995 about storage. We were jealous of Molokai. That's 30 years ago. What's the deal? Help me with that.
Well, we don't have a lot of storage. That is a good point. If we had more reservoirs, then maybe we could capture more of the water up the hill and hold it. But our water infrastructure is behind in a lot of ways. You can
Or
store
take it
water
out
in
of
a lot of ways. You can have reservoirs, which would be like a hole in the ground, and it's better if it's lined, or you're going to lose it to the volcanic soils. You can store it in your aquifer, which is, in my book, the best place. Let the water be in its natural system, which is that it would rain and water would go into the groundwater. It's stored in the aquifer, in the rock formations. But as humans, we dig wells into that and we pump water out of that. So we disturb the system in that way. It can also be stored in tanks, which is probably the most expensive way to store it. But
as a
storage would
swimming
be
pool.
part well, yeah, swimming pool is a storage in a way.
So
Yeah.
when they, for example, right? Outlaw pools on the west side of Maui. Isn't that a new rule? So I think about water that we can get from the air. What would happen if we were self-sufficient? And first of all, these are two separate issues because I keep hearing them talk about we have to conserve water as people, and we watch them doing foolish things for decades. Stop me
You
if
know
I'm
what
wrong.
was there? Did you see that report, Jason, that just came out yesterday about West Maui? It was very interesting
How's it
in
going?
that in Lahaina, the households that use the most water are non-owner occupied, and they use a lot more water than the owner occupied. And a significant part of the residents in Lahaina use less than the average assumed by the Department of Water Supply. They use 500 gallons per day, and the assumption is you would use 600. And then there are many more, I think it was 75% use 1,000 gallons or less. But then there's a small percent that uses a lot more. And if those 35, whatever percent it is, the smaller percent, if they would use 1,000 gallons per day or less, like everyone else is, we could save 1.7 million gallons per day in West Maui. And so that's just asking a few people who are excessively using water to dial it back and be in the same, range that their neighbors are and that the
I'm
rest
with
of the
you.
residents of the island are. And
Oh, that is for sure.
that's particularly important there in Lahaina because right now there is an affordable housing development that has been told you can't build because there's no water available for you.
Well, that's why I talk about water from the air. And also, it does seem that that problem is easily capped by this is your allocation of water for the day
Right,
and
right,
cut it off. If you're especially
right.
if you're doing a
What it
development.
shows you is that there is enough water, just some people are using more than their share. But when it comes to the water resource, and this is one of the things that kind of amuses me too, our water resource discussions revolve around how we use water. And we never talk about how do we make water, and you're talking about a technology that can extract water from air. And in certain
Atmosphere
places,
jet. It's
yeah,
so amazing because people that are in remote areas all sort of chuckle when we speak to them. Why? Because getting water from the air is not new. It now is technology has made it where
right.
you can buy
But
it in
but
rock.
it only works in certain conditions, right? It's a natural process, and you have to have that balanced conditions to make water condense. That's what that is. You're condensing
And I
water
know that
out of the
was
air.
he told me
But
today that water in the
uh,
desert. So just I know that we have. I only bring it up to say that those that are inclined and have what about putting it in a 30-year mortgage where it makes sense to put $40,000 system for a house that's like nothing. It's like a solar
well,
system.
that may be part of the solution, but the bigger solution, the bigger water machine is the Mana. It is
Conservation.
the mountain. It is the
Oh
forest.
yeah.
And that is what it's doing. It's pulling water out of the air. And so when we're talking all of this, conserve water, capture water, all of that, we need to give equal weight or perhaps more weight even to restoring our forests and our natural systems that attract the rain, that help pull the water out of the air so that
I
we
like
have
the
more resource to start with. And
I like
then,
the way you're talking
yeah, and then
about that
use
resource.
our natural resources, our aquifers. Don't over pump the wells. Don't pump the wells until you're pulling the salt water in. Right now, every area that we're pumping wells out in Navaiha at Iao and in West Maui, we're starting to salinate our aquifer because we're over pumping the wells. And that doesn't make any sense. What are we doing with that water? We're irrigating grass, lawns on luxury homes,
Why is it that
water
when you say
wasting by non-owner occupied homes. It's like, why are we squandering it? Why are we not paying attention to where it comes from? Why are we not caring for the natural systems? I think too often people want a technology fix and they ignore the most ancient technology of all, the technology of nature, the way that nature does it. And so that's actually the latest term of art in the water technology world is nature-based solutions.
Well,
So, for instance, for the flooding, the nature-based solution is a wetland because that's what used to hold the sediment, all the mud and the water before we built condos in them. So it's really the new old ways. We have to do it now, the new old ways. And that is to really understand how this planet works and align our technologies with the planetary technologies.
and so I don't know what those kind of things cost. I know that somewhere they should start catching water, and not in a decade. They're going to like set it up. Look, we had a little bit of rain. How much of that rain did we harvest?
Right.
I think of it that way, just like these big fields, when we talk about taking green waste and putting carbon back in the soil and regenerate, all that stuff. This is another really important technology that I think we should use. We know everyone says, well, like Israel does desalination. We could do that. Costs are high. There are ways to make that all that cost be converted to things that we have abundance of. So all kinds of things could happen, but uh, the practicality is, and the one that really hits the heart is to that what you said, which is all of us have to recognize we have to take care of the land here, let it feed us, and these natural systems that forever and ever were honored here, right? And things before they didn't do what I want to say. They didn't conform to it. It had to conform to them. We're putting our footprint in and we're splashing in the mud. And
Well, I think it's, think about like optimization. We want to optimize what we have right now. We have to start where we are now. That's where we are, right? So we
so
have to
where do we
start
where do
there,
we go?
right?
If you were
And
sitting, what would you do?
well, I would look at where can we capture water, but I would also look at where can we restore the systems, the natural systems that capture water, that
Okay.
capture sediment, that hold water, that hold soils to the on the land, restore those, and design nature-based systems that work with those. So you may not have a 100% natural system. Let's say there's so much flood water coming down that your wetland couldn't hold it all, especially because your wetlands are smaller now because you've built houses all around. Well, you could have an underground cistern and collect some of the water in there. You could have ways to drop the sediment out, slow it down and drop the sediment out, collect part of it underground, have part of it in the wetland, providing habitat for birds, settling more solids. You could have your parks be settling basins that during these big but not very frequent floods, could hold the water and sediment. And we can give up having the grassy park for a short time in order to not have houses flooded and to not have everything buried in mud. So it's how can we optimize what we have, the space, which is an important resource, the space for handling sediment and water, and for growing plants and for growing food, for growing plants that provide ecological function, that provide hydrological function. You know, we haven't really sat down and looked at this as a whole system. And it's ironic, if you ask me, that we're in Hawaii and where the Ahupua'a system, that would be the management unit, if you will, to look at, like, from the top of the mountain out to the edge of the reef, what are the resources? How are they connected? Who are the people that need them? How are they used? And how can we optimize that so that we get like the most bang for our buck, is that's the capitalist saying, but the most benefit from the management of what we have. And so it's a community. I think it takes community. It takes people who actually know those systems whether that's from their intergenerational, multi-generational families having been there, or because they're a historian or a scholar or a scientist or a planner. People come to this information from all different perspectives, but if we can all sit down and look at this one ahupua'a at a time and not waste things and optimize the use of things, we would be better off than we are now. We tend to have a very Western mindset of big man-made systems are somehow going to solve our problems, when really those big man-made systems actually created a lot of our problems. Like transportation systems created a lot of water quality problems, um, even cut off the flow of water underground and can cause, uh, water supply problems. And so it's like, you know, reality check. We live on a planet, we live on a living planet. And modern technology, man made technology, great stuff used in the proper way, but you can't pretend like the natural system doesn't exist.
No, I
And
thought that was well said. So the system, all I was talking about is band-aids. You hear
yeah,
band-aids for the things that exist now. How are we going to get them out of the equation so that a local system can accommodate better? And by trying to make everything my goal. Self-sufficiency is just that just means we're even. I should hope that would be the minimum goal. And
right. Well, Band-Aid solutions, serve a purpose. They take care of something that's urgent, but sometimes it's a Band-Aid when you need a full-on emergency room. And sometimes, you can't just keep doing Band-Aids instead of addressing the sources of the problems and really doing the bigger solutions. So,
like you mentioned, one solution is telling people that water restriction and use is the new way of life, and we're going to be having beautiful brown lawns, and the green we're going to treat in a different way. And I'm using it as an example that we learn to moderate, like you say,
right.
not
Well,
all
you
the
know what?
energy.
I have a green lawn, and so does my neighbor. I water my lawn twice a week. He waters his 3 times a day, and he uses a lot more water than I do. And his grass is only slightly greener than mine. And also, he doesn't let any leaves decay on his grass, so he doesn't have a mulching effect. So that's why he has to water his grass more. But if you have trees and have shade and have, a moderate amount of leaf litter that decays and mulches your grass, you don't have to water so much, and you still have a nice, beautiful lawn that you can walk on barefoot, that my dog enjoys playing on. So it doesn't necessarily mean we have to get rid of lawns. But it was really sad because that house that is next to me that has all that watering going on, when I first moved in, there was no watering going on because it was xeriscaped. It had pohaku everywhere. It had garden beds, and it had, larger bushes and shrubs, bananas and other things, and walkways and pathways. So it was a lot of hardscape with natural stone from here, and they would periodically water their trees, but there wasn't this wholesale watering of a lawn going on that's going on now. So they actually tore out what was a totally appropriate culturally and hydrologically and climate wise to that property, and instead put in a very typical green grass lawn like you would see in the suburbs back on the continent. So, it was really sad to see that, to see it go from something so sustainable to something that's totally not sustainable. And guess what? That's an empty house. That's a non-owner occupied property that no one's ever here. and but yet it uses water every day. And so these are things that could be addressed through tax
Yeah.
policy. There is a definite relationship we're starting to see between housing and how it's used and water. We saw that too when Bill 9 was being discussed about the taking some of the condos out of short-term rentals, the Minatoya list. There was some analysis done of water use, and they started noticing, hey, short-term rentals use more water than long-term rentals do. And again, so here's something we're doing that is decreasing our housing supply and decreasing our water supply. And yet we're sold the bill of goods that our economic survival depends on having this industry. And it's like, well, wait a minute, this industry has been pushed on us to the extent that it's taking up all of our housing and our water, and there aren't enough for the people who actually live here. So that just doesn't make sense. That is not optimization of our resources. That is what we need to stop doing. So it doesn't have to be extreme. It doesn't mean we have no short-term rentals. It doesn't mean we have no lawns. It just means we work smarter to do better with what we have and not squander it and not, value it. So if we're giving it up, if we're using it, if we're utilizing it, we want to make sure we're doing it in a way that benefits our community.
Have they done any studies of young to old? Are the young people going, hey, resources are running out. We better use less? Do we get any kind of sense of that?
I've never seen a study like that. That would be really interesting.
Because maybe we'll grow into a more aware, the ones that don't have any water left that go, water's expensive. I hope that that's now clicking in where, I mean, it would be an interesting, I don't know how
Well,
they,
look who's leading the charge on climate. It's very young people. It's, junior high and high school age kids leading the charge on climate because they are the ones that are going to inherit an unlivable planet if something
so when
doesn't.
we're talking to an audience out here, who are we aiming our targets at? People like us that don't wisely use resources, someone that plans a property and never mind the cultural disrespect, abuses use of local resources for local people, drives prices up. That's why I use the thing about, I sound like a broken record, water from air. You want to be able to use this place, don't take from the resources. And then we'll consider whether it's right. And I like when earlier you were talking about the difference between it's going to handle it now and then emergency. Why haven't they called this an emergency to the point where they're allowing different kinds of structures more easily? What's your hit on that?
In terms of housing, is that what you meant?
Yeah, I mean, you and I know people personally who have nowhere to live. So now they're
Right.
called houseless or homeless. And you can't judge a book by its cover. There are rocket scientists out there now. Older people that are suddenly think, I thought I had senior housing. I didn't want to see my rent go up. Someone sold my house, they tripled my rent. FEMA comes in, blows out the
Mhm.
rental market. I need help. I call that emergency. We have a mayor that's, it's hard for me to have someone feel proud that they build 1,000 or 2,000 when you need 10,000, when you've needed it
Well,
for
here's
decades.
my observation. Whenever there's a hurricane, a big storm, a big disaster, somehow we manage to house everyone. And the reason we're able to is because we set aside certain rules for a short time. And I think we could continue some form of that. I think we need to look at our housing codes closely and our zoning codes and see, are there things that we can relax without having a really terrible, harmful effect that would allow more housing? I do think there's still more housing to be had in that way by,
Changing the
relaxing
codes
some
on
of
an
the
emergency
rigidity.
basis.
Like for instance, when I was at one point, I lived on ag land, and you're only allowed to have two kitchens. And so there were two kitchens, and one was a normal house with a kitchen, main house on the property. The other one was like an ohana with a kitchen. But in addition to that kitchen and bathrooms there were also like little pods, little bedrooms around the property. And
Yep.
so different people had their little private space. The bathrooms and the kitchen were shared at the ohana. And so you had, instead of an ohana housing one family, you had three or four different households who shared the resources of bathrooms and kitchen, but each had their own private space. Like, why is that not okay?
Well,
Why
that's because,
and the county came in and was like, oh no, all you could have that if you wanted to, but all those little pods have to be connected by hallways with rooftops and walls.
well, I know a guy that 25 years ago put walkways, and like they're really outside walkways with big, easy covered walkways. And that's how he got his loans as one property. And they all turned into conforming loan with a non-conforming use. All these little things that they do here.
Right, but a
I
lot of
don't
those things
find
cost money,
cluster.
and
I
and
call
that
that that's called the cluster housing and experiential housing. Those are even on the books, but someone has to
now,
do
yeah,
something with them. Yeah, but no
yeah,
one's doing anything with them. Like, what about, this is not the housing show, although because water is such an issue. What are we going
they're
to do
related.
here now? I mean, when I see cob houses, we can all, as groups, take the earth with the green and build responsible structures that can stand forever, but even if considered for a short time on an emergency basis, can solve this initial problem and start to also change the social nature of what's going on around here. Because it's rough out there on the street right now.
Hmm.
I've
And
never
getting
seen
worse.
more normal people in my life that are getting beat up, taken in by the police, uh, beaten up in the park in the middle of the day, cars left out at night and stripped, people, all kinds of stuff. And I know you know some of that stuff too. Why? Because we have to change the housing. How many places in the world they have to say housing first? By the way, I'm sorry I keep looking down, but my screen is below my camera. Housing
I'm not even
first.
sure which way I'm looking.
You're fine. But when I'm looking at you, it's not like people might wonder what I'm doing. I'm looking at you. I was looking at
I'm
you.
looking at you.
So the glasses didn't matter, you see. But I have to see what time it is. Oh, we still have time. Uh, how are you doing personally? Are you doing anything work wise? Are you have the projects? I've heard of things that are going on in Kihei, and I always wonder, is Robin involved with that? Like the one in the wetlands one above, how do I call it? Above Hope Chapel, sort of over the middle, 41-acre place that they want to make a park and they want to turn part of it for houseless. You involved in that one?
Yeah, yeah, the eco village. Sorry about that. The the eco village, that is a place where we need to think differently, where we could solve a lot of problems by having safe parking and a managed encampment on the highland, and doing some restoration work of the wetland, to help with flooding and sediment retention and habitat and all of those things. You know, that's Keokea Gulch. That's one of the three big gulches that come into Kihei. There's four really: Waiakoa, uh, Kalani Hakoi, Waipuilani, and Keokea. They're all big gulches that bring a lot of water into Kihei, into our populated areas. And that water, if you map it out where the water goes, you'll see that it's all connected and that we have a whole series of unrecognized wetlands that that water traverses. But a lot of those wetlands have not been developed yet. You might ask, why did they not develop those areas? Well, probably because they were the wetlands and they were the hardest areas to develop. But now, because of a shortage of housing, a lot of developers have proposed to put affordable housing in those areas. But these are drainage ways, they're waterways, they are wetlands, and they may not look like it during the summer. But if you went out there with a shovel and dug a hole, you know, somewhere between, you know, 1 foot and 2 feet, sometimes less than 1 foot, sometimes right at the surface, you're going to find water.
Wow.
And yeah, it's not very deep at all.
That's
And
something.
when, of course, in the winter during a flood, it might be several feet above the surface of water. So
Wow.
they, you know, we need to honor that these are our waterways. We need to protect them, optimize the use of them. You know, we can grow food and fiber, have bird habitat, have green space, have uh, carbon sequestered, have cooling effect of all of these plants. I mean, what does Kihei need more than anything is cooling. You know, it's getting
Is,
almost unlivable.
who owns that land now?
You know, I would have to go look it back up, but there's two large parcels. One of them is 40 acres, and I think the other one also is close to 40 acres. But those two together are between Welikahau and where the waterways cross into Laie, Mauka, and then in by St. Teresa's Church go out to the ocean at Laie, Makai. There's also on the Mackay side of South Kihei Road, the Halama wetlands. Um, there's, I mean, there's a lot of wetlands, and some of these are pretty wet, even in the summer. If you go walking around in them, you'll find out. And, you know, they look pretty rough because invasive plants have overgrown. And there's the opportunity. Those invasive plants are kind of like non-owner occupied houses. They use more than their share of the water. So if we could get those invasive plants out, um, you have more water. The water levels come up. We've measured this. We had a spring come up when we started doing restoration at Laie Malka, and they saw the same thing upcountry when they started doing restoration in the gulches after the fire. Suddenly springs appeared. Why? Because you're restoring the plants, and so you're restoring that natural balance of that natural water machine that makes our water for us.
You see out there, some of you go to the meetings and get this kind of rich delivery of knowledge, clear and straight. Thank you very much, Robin.
Well,
Um,
I'll tell you that didn't come from meetings. That came from people with their hands in the lepo. That came from people showing up, doing the work, doing their kilo, making their observations. We saw that change when we did that work.
is that
And
the stuff,
that's a
Lucianne?
powerful lesson.
That's the stuff for years we've been seeing all the people taking care. The Sierra Club, and you could probably name the group's names always change over time. But there's so many committed people to these things. Um,
The more we restore the land, the more we will be restoring the water. That is
yeah,
for sure.
yeah. Well, I wonder, when I think about these groups and all the sudden, what's the word, drying up, how funny, of the money. Someone said Hale Maolu is going to be cut 50% for senior housing support from the feds. It doesn't sound like I can believe we're in America. But uh, putting those things, how can you put those things aside? How are these environmental groups making it through these lean times? Are you seeing working together more open to doing more together?
I think we have to be, and there's less actual cash, so there's always a deep reliance on volunteerism and on community coming together to help. So that is intensifying. And it has gotten competitive. And, like, for instance, Save the Wetlands, who we didn't pursue a grant this year because you have to have a fiscal sponsor. There's a lot of infrastructure that goes along with, having money.
Are
But
there any trade?
you can still as a group go out and support other projects. You can still as individuals or a group go out and do the work, because that's what matters, is doing the work. What's lacking more than money is the willingness of landowners, because these landowners, many of them bought this land from a speculative position that they were going to one day develop it and make money off of it. And of course, many other people had done that. So that was a reasonable thing for them to think that they could do. But at this point, that land may have more value as flood retention, or helping to generate water supply, or helping water to go back into our aquifer instead of out into the ocean. So the value system has started to shift, but it needs to shift more to where we value taking care of the land more than we do making money off of the land. We need the land to live, to
So the
to
way
have
my brain
water.
is thinking is very, that's why I asked who owns it. Very wealthy people that own X land that were looking to, or speculators that were looking to make money, could do a land swap. I mean, there's just so many basic things. I don't know why there's no one in that role. I don't know what that role is in government. It's all these little individual organizations. That thing that Kelly had created, that committee and the whole department that got blown up. Excuse my French.
Well, the county did just establish their first land manager, so that's a positive step, because before they never even looked at it as something to be managed, Um, but yeah, the
The
sorry, I
importance of
lost my train of thought.
no, my thought was the importance, whether you're elected or not, the importance of recreation of a consciousness at the council level,
Oh,
and going on, of an environmental and climate action crisis that creates emergency housing solutions, alternative housing solutions. You know, this, when you were describing a house and a cottage, a second bedroom, a second kitchen outside with 40 years ago, God, now, in 88, when I got here originally, out in Walo, it was the main house, and then down the cliffs, there was a teepee and a kitchen and a little outside thing and a bunch of pods of many people for years. And it was a wonderful meeting place, and it had good social energy. It had good everything. And then years later, the county didn't like, they came in, they closed it all down. And now, sadly, I mean, just
so I,
outrageous.
I kind of walk the middle line on some of these, because I've seen the places like that didn't have adequate sanitation. They didn't have adequate management of wastewater. And so that contaminates our water supply, and that's a health hazard. So there is some area of compromise there that's
Okay.
beneficial and not unnecessarily expensive or over the top or rigid in the requirements. So there's some meeting in the middle, some place that we can meet to have housing that we can afford to build, because it's not only not affordable for individuals, we as a society can't afford to build enough housing the way that we're requiring it to be built.
Right.
If
And the
we could, we would have
retrofit,
done that.
but
Yeah.
the retrofit aspect is another area of emergency that has to be really considered an important piece. I mean, I say retrofit, experimental and cluster housing. Maybe it sounds like just a wide peak, but it, like you talk about the need for housing, I still go into the fact that what I see them doing on the west side, they bring these trailers in for $1 zillion, now rent them out to people that were broke and lost their places for thousands of dollars, supported by what? Monies that came from an insurance claim or that didn't come, or all kinds of weirdness, pushing rents up, using land in ways that are not sustainable. What's the deal? Why do we have a council? Why do we have a mayor?
Well,
Ah,
I will say that there has been some progress, not enough, but back to the wetlands when you were asking who owns it and why
yeah,
can't we do these things? Well, the county council did put $5 million in the budget to try to buy one of these gulches where a developer was proposing affordable housing. But the developer who had bought it for $1 million suddenly wanted 15 million for it, and we only had five. So there
oh,
has to be some limit to the exploitation.
is
Um,
that a choice where
and
eminent
and
domain would come in?
right, right.
I
But
mean,
even
you
if
could
you
say,
have
hey,
even with escalating property values, even eminent domain gets expensive. So we still have some adjusting to do on how we value things and the affordability of things. And our whole system kind of brings it all down as if it's an individual thing, as if it's an individual failure that you can't afford a home, or it's an individual property owner's problem that they have flooding or something, and it's not. It's communal, and the
and
solutions
it's
have to
an
be.
individual problem that our houses are $1 million for why, Kapoo? And it's like,
Yeah,
what is
that's all a societal thing, and
crazy?
a lot of it is unlimited capitalism, that
Well,
market
and
values,
a,
but markets, markets aren't bad things, markets are markets, and I think we just have to be uh, more resourceful, more creative, but also more flexible to allow something different than what's happening. Because the
and
systems
that,
we have, the controls we have in place have got us what we have right now.
well,
And
that's
we
the
see that's not
big, big,
working.
big, 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 big thing. That's the huge one. I Do you know who Leona Bach Namura is? She ran for the Paia Makwa seat. I had her on the show a few weeks ago. She ran 15 years ago. And I said, hey, Leona, you want to be on the show? She said, what would I talk about? I said, you still live in the same area? Yeah. Everything perfect now? No. Good. We have what to talk about. So in that conversation, we got to why are these things changing? We're not stupid. We keep hearing how many experts you got to bring in from wherever. And the answer is someone is controlling something that I don't understand that something. I
Yeah.
don't understand it at all. But that element is out there horribly. I hope that can be addressed somehow because
Well, I want to go back to the government for a minute, because the council has done things and the mayor
okay,
has done things. I would like to see more, and we have a council seat that's open
right,
right now that will be decided on November 20th. Um, so that's next week after
yeah,
the show airs. People can testify at the county council. There are three candidates to fill the seat of Tasha Kama, who passed away. May she rest in peace. They, you have a choice. So look into these candidates.
who are they
Look.
by name? Who are they by name?
I don't have all three. I just know Carol
I
Lee
know
Kamakona is
Batangan,
one of them. I'm sorry,
who
say it again.
Carolee Kamakona, we know, who was
Hmm.
running before. And I don't know his first name, Kaunoe Batangan, who I don't know, he may be working now with Tasha and that group. Or
Well, yeah, she had indicated that she had confidence in him.
yeah,
Um, but my point is for people to look into these three candidates and decide
what
which one they think will bring to the government what we need right now to think differently, to value, to have the values that the community has, to value people and Ina and Vi over money. You know, though, whatever you, and those are my thoughts, right? Those are what I think is wrong, is that we have our values kind of out of order or not aligned properly. So, but each individual has to make that for themselves, you know, make those decisions for themselves. So, what is it you think is wrong with this society? Which one of those three candidates is going to best align with what your values are and you think needs to be done? We need people to get active in our government. When it's only money that shows up and talks, then we get a very capitalist, money-driven system. If people show up and talk about other values, then we might get a different result than what we've gotten in recent years. So we need
not
those people to show up.
not only locally but nationally. That's the reason we have the
Yeah.
same thing going on all the way up and down. We only have a handful of minutes left, and I know that I move this thing in every direction.
So the third guy, there's Kelson Batangan, Carolee Kamikona, and Virgilio Leo are at Coley Cole. So everybody needs to look up into those
Freshen
three
up
and see which one
this
they would
week.
support. Yeah. And let the council know and let the mayor know. And, you know, if you want more nature-based systems, let the county council and the mayor know. They listen. They do listen. I got to tell you that. That's one thing I learned running for office and participating in our system of government. I might not get everything I wish to see, but I do see that it has an effect when I show up.
Well, just in that, I very much appreciate you, and I appreciate you sharing so freely here, especially with all kinds of personal issues going on. Your generosity in everything. Our whole community thanks you for the hard work that you're doing. I
Oh,
hope if
thanks.
there's another election, someone will twist your arm and ask you to run again. So
I've got plenty to do. I'm happy to show up and do my part. Yeah,
these are funny times,
yeah.
and you always seem so calm. You put it in such terms that I'd hope that we get that message out so broadly that we see some activity. Thank you for your hard and deliberate uh, passion uh, for all of us. Thank you, Butch, for being with me. Here in the neutral zone, we are anything but neutral, but we love each other. We're all part of a whole. We're a holistic one. But then there's always that zinger. That's it. But not in this world, because the more we work together, the more we're going to solve all these problems. I really think
Thank
we
you
can.
for having me, Jason. Thank you for having me.
You're
Ahui
very
ho.
well. Aloha, my dear.